Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this next video lesson. We are going to talk about functions, specifically using flowcharts of how we're going to be creating our programs and using functions. And in this particular case, to create a program that's going to display odd numbers based on the user input. Okay, so here we have our main program that's going to run, and you see that here we have a function call. And function call you can determine because it's a rectangle with lines inside like this, two vertical lines, and so that means that we're going to jump to a particular procedure. Okay, so when I jump to that procedure, here's the more nitty-gritty information here in terms of the kind of parameters or if this thing returns anything, but we know that there's no returning for this particular function, otherwise it would say returns a whole number, or whatever. In this case, we just know that there are parameters that are part of this function called display odd numbers, and here's some variables that you're supposed to create, and here's what the logical flow looks like, and so forth and so on. So what we are going to do is we are going to act as translators. We're going to take this flowchart and we're going to translate this into the necessary code for, in this case, C# to create this program. Alright, so let me switch over here to Visual Studio, and I'm going to create a new project. And this will be a C# program, Windows Forms application. So we are working with C#. And specifically, we're dealing with functions, and we're going to be using a flowchart to create our function. I'm not sure if that's, yeah, I'll put a capital C. And specifically to display odd numbers. Press Enter. Now when this opens up, let's go ahead and drag and drop a button, a label, and a text box. So a button, a label, and also a text box. I want all of these to be 12 points, so I'm going to select them all. And in the Properties panel, we'll change this font size to 12 points. And now I'll just simply take the label by itself, move it into the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to change its name. Now, change its text property, I should say. Now it looks like it's supposed to say how many odd numbers do you want to display. Alright, so that's what this print thing means. This print instruction, what is the output to the user? So in this case, how many odd numbers do you want to display? Okay, so I'll take this guy, go to the text property. How many odd numbers do you want, to display? Put a question mark, and then let's go ahead and place a text box after that sentence so that we can have the user input into here. By the way, if you wanted to change the alignment of what it looks like when the user enters a value, currently it's set to left, but you can change it to right or to center. I'll select center, so when the user enters a number into here, it's going to be displayed in the center. Alright, so I'll just simply place this button over here underneath the request. Something like this looks good. And we'll just simply say submit. And then I need a label down here so that I can display whatever the odd number is, or what the odd numbers that are going to be displayed as a result of the user input. So I'll take this guy, copy and paste it. Let's change the auto size to false so I can resize it. We'll change the border style to fixed single. And so now I can change this to something like this, say for example. And I don't want the text to be in the upper left-hand corner, so I'm going to change the alignment so that it is middle center. So now that the user, when the user enters however many odd numbers they want to see, it's going to be in the middle center of the label. And I don't want there to be text, so let me get rid of that. I'm going to close the form. Something like that looks good. Let's get rid of the minimize and the maximize box. And I'm going to change that verbiage, the text from form 1 to displaying odd numbers. Something like that. Now, did this flowchart give you any of the instruction that you needed to create this? No. So this is something that you're going to start to do as a result of the experience that you're gaining for creating these C# programs, and You're just simply going to use common sense of how a program would look like. Unless the boss or the customer gives you a specific design, you're going to have to propose something, and so this is what we're doing. We're proposing that the form looks something like this, our program look like this, the graphical user interface, and then we can go from there. Alright, so let's go ahead and give names to the various items. For this text box, we're going to call this txt user num. Now, are you limited to txt user num? By all means, no. You can call it whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to call it txt user num. For this button, we're going to call it btn submit. And then for this label, we're going to call it lbl result. Let's go ahead and save our work. And now we can go ahead and double click on the button so we enter into the code area. Now, before I start working on our main program, I want to start working on the functions because I'm going to be calling them. So let's go ahead and create a function. Now, I know this is a void function. That is a function that doesn't return anything because I don't see anything over here like what does this thing return? Typically, you would see something like return, and then it would say like return whole number or return double or something like that. In this case, it just says display odd numbers is the name of the function. So we'll say void display odd numbers. So void display odd numbers. And then within the parentheses, now what arguments am I going to send to this particular function? Well, notice over here it's saying that it's going to need a whole number. Now the whole number is going to be called user num parameter. Okay, so we'll say int user num parameter. And I'm going to open and close the curly braces like that. Okay, what's the next thing that I need to do? Well, I need to declare some variables here. So let me go ahead and type in declarations. And in the declarations section, I'm going to create a whole number, so we know that that's an integer, and it's going to be called counter. All right, so we'll say int counter. And I think I saw something about what to set it equal to. Yep, there it is. We're supposed to set it equal to 0. So we'll say equals 0. Now I'm going to get another variable, or declare another variable. We're going to call this guy odd num, and we set it to 1. Okay, so odd num, and we set it to 1. All right, so that takes care of the declarations part of our flowchart. Now I have this next section over here, so I have to ask myself, what is this diamond? It's either going to be a selection structure or a repetition structure. It's going to be an if statement or a while statement. Well, I think it's going to be a while statement because check this out. As I flow down, it's going to go back over here right back to the top of this diamond. So that tells me this is a while statement. While the counter is less than user number parameter. So while the counter is less than user number parameter. Now, if that's true, we enter into the while statement. And what are we supposed to do in the while statement? Well, if it's true, that rhombus, it's either used for reading or for writing. And in this case, it looks like we're writing something, we're printing something. We're printing the odd number and a space to the output. Okay, so, and the only reason why I say I know it's the output is because I see that word print. Well, for us, in a C# visual program, that means we're printing stuff to this label. So that means lbl result.text, we are going to update that. So here's the old value of the label and whatever the text property is. And we're going to concatenate that with what? The odd number. Okay, well, the odd number is an integer, but that needs to be converted into a string. So I'll say convert.toString, open and close parentheses. Let me put my cursor back in there so that I can type odd number. And then we also need to concatenate that with a space because over here it says print the odd number and a space. Okay, so an odd number and a space, and I put the semicolon right there. What's the next thing I'm supposed to do? Well, after I'm finished with that, increment the counter. Okay, so counter, we're going to increment that, so like this. And then odd number, we're going to increment that by 2. Okay, so odd number, we're going to increment that by 2. And that takes care of this while statement because while this is true, you do this over and over and over again. Finally, when you're false, then you just simply end that particular function. So when this is finished, we jump out and there's nothing left to be done. Let me save my work. and go back over here to my main program, which is when I click the submit button. Well, what am I supposed to do over there? Well, according to the main part of the program, the first thing you need to do is to declare a user number as a whole number. Oh, that's an integer. I said user number, I meant user input. So integer user input. So first of all, declarations. Integer user input. Okay? And then typically I say get user input, and then I'll type calculations and then output. And then we make modifications to those comments based on how our program is going to work. Okay, so over here, what are we supposed to do? It says clear the output. Oh, so I should do that here. Clear the output, and that's going to be LBL text is going to be assigned nothing. And the reason why we're doing that is because if there was a previous display, we want to get rid of that and then display the new content, which is what we were about to do. So that's why we were clearing the output. All right, print, how many odd numbers do you want to display? Okay, so we've done that. And in the form of this graphical user interface, we've displayed that as a label. So that's taken care of. And now we have a rhombus, which means you are either reading or you're writing. And in this case, we are reading a value, user input, which means that we're going to have to get the data that was entered by the user in the text box, and we're going to have to put that into user input. Okay? So over here, user input, and then I'll say convert dot to int 32, and the reason why I have to do that is because this text box contains text, and so I had to change that text to a number and then assign it to a variable. So put the semicolon at the very end. What else am I supposed to do? After the reading, it looks like I call a function called display odd numbers. Okay, so I think I'll just combine these two. I'll say calculations and output. And what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to call a function, namely this function over here. So I'm going to call display odd numbers, parens. It looks like you need something. What do you need? You need the user number. It's got to be in the form of an integer. Well, I have that, right? User input. And so you need that, so I'll just give you user input. Okay, save my work. So when I call this function, it's going to jump over here, giving you that value, and then it's going to do its job, and then when we're done, we go back over here, and of course there's nothing left to do. We're finished with our program, so that'll be the end of the program. Or, well, at least we'll just simply see a stagnant display for the graphical user interface. All right, so let's go ahead and run the program. And it says, how many numbers do you want to display? I want to display 3 odd numbers. Okay, 1, 3, 5. Good. I want to display 4 odd numbers. Good. I want to display 20 odd numbers. All right, so first of all, let me just make sure there are 20 items here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Good. Let me make sure they're all odd. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 11, 15, 19, 21, 23, 25, 27. Yep. Looking good, looking good. And yes, they're all odd numbers. This is great. Okay, so if there were a problem and you would want to troubleshoot, here's one of the things that I would recommend that you do. So for example, let's say that we want to make sure that everything is working fine just before the call into a function. I would place a break over here on the left-hand side, and so what that means is that you're going to stop time here before you proceed with the program. So let's go ahead and run the program, and as you can see here, we just have to enter data. So let's say that I want to display 3 odd numbers. I click submit, and notice how time has frozen here where the yellow arrow is. So right now, if I hover my mouse over user input, it says that that currently is equal to 3, and that makes sense. I just entered 3. And you are about to go into a function called display odd numbers and send this. Personally, I like this autos panel or the locals panel. I like this, and the way that you can get that is if you go to debug. Now, by the way, you can only ask or request these while the program is in the debug mode, and then you'll see this debug windows, and then here's autos, here's locals. Those are the 2 right here, and then I just simply position them over here on the right hand side of my IDE, my Integrated Development Environment, or Visual Studio. Okay, so however you want to troubleshoot, whether it's this way or just simply hovering your mouse over to see what the value is. User input is 3, user input is 3, that's up to you. Okay, so let's go into the function. Now these three guys are important. So over here I see step into, I see step over, and step out. Well, I want to step into this function just so I can investigate what's going on. So this guy over here says step into, or I could press F11. So I'm going to click. Now, okay, I had this variable that I'm sending to you, but in this program, in this function, we're going to call this user number parameter, which is equal to 3. So this is a frisbee. You just took that frisbee and you cloned it. So now you have a copy of that frisbee. Now both frisbees are cloned and they both have the number 3 on the top. You threw the clone and you have the original. You threw the clone, so that means over here, I'm not going to call you user input. The clone that you just sent me, I want to call it user number parameter, but just note it's the value that you just sent to me. It's just that it's a copy of the value, it's not the original. So we call this pass by value. You just passed me a clone, you threw a frisbee to me, you have the original, I know that, and it's got the number 3, so I'm going to use that when it helps me to display odd numbers. So let me scroll down a little bit. Currently we're freezing time right here. So at this point now I can go ahead and click step over because I'm not jumping into a function. So I step over. Counter is about to be assigned 0. Odd number is about to be assigned 1. Click. Okay, so sure enough, counter is 0 and odd number is 1. Perfect. Is 0 less than 3? Yes, it is. So let me go ahead and step over. We are now inside of the while loop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the old output of the label. Well, that label, as you can see over here, has nothing in it. See how it says quote, quote? There's nothing inside there. You're about to concatenate nothing with the odd number, which is the number 1, but we're about to convert it to a string, and then we're going to also concatenate a space after that as well. Okay, so when I'm finished, I can go ahead and click step over. And so now notice what our lbl.text result looks like. Here's the number 1 and here's a space. Cool, that's what I wanted. I'm going to take that value of counter, which is currently 0, and increment it. So let me step over, and sure enough, counter is 1. I'm going to take that odd number, which is 1, and increment it by 2. So if I step over, odd number is now 3. Looking good. So we say step over, and what happens? We go back to the top of the while loop, and we ask, shall we do this again? Are we going to do another lap around the track? Well, yes, if the counter is less than user number. Well, the counter is 1, user number is 3. That's a true condition, so we go into the while loop. So now here we are. We're going to get the label, which currently has this information. We're going to concatenate that with whatever the odd number is and convert it into a string, and then also we're going to concatenate a space. Okay, so when I step over, notice now that it says, where is it? Here we go. 1 space 3 space. So we've displayed 2 odd numbers. We increment the counter, we increment odd number, and we go back to the top and ask, are we going to do this again? Well, since counter is 2, and that is in fact less than 3, yes, we're going to do this again. So we're going to take the old label, concatenate odd number, which as you can see is 5, and concatenate a space. So this is what the old stuff looks like, and now the new updated label now has 1, 3, and 5 with a space after that. Increment the counter, increment the odd number, go back to the top and ask, shall we do this again? Well, the counter is 3. Is 3 less than 3? No. 3 is equal to 3, but it's not less than 3. So when I click step over, it jumps out of the while statement, and we are now finished. So this debugging is really helpful because then you can stop the program and follow it along step by step, and I would encourage you to do that. Right now, I would suggest that you do that with your working function, with your working program, and then later on, when your program is broken, if there's some debugging that you need to perform, then this tool is valuable because you can say, okay, stop the program here and here because these are the different locations that I want to investigate, and stop time so I can find out what's going on with my program. So to continue, I'll just simply go over here. I'm not going to step over anymore. I'm just going to click continue to see what happens, and so sure enough, here's my program, and I get to see what happens. Because I removed that break, now if I try some other value like 9, it won't break anymore. It just simply displays the 9 odd numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're all odd. Perfect. This is exactly what I want. And that's it. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.